sales is really good at walking into the bar and getting dates. Marriage is different. And when you're in that chief customer officer role, really the purchase order is kind of the beginning of the relationship almost.
Trust is a two-way street. As they earn your trust, you have to earn their trust as well as a leader. And part of that is I try not to ask the people that work around me to do jobs that I'm not willing to do myself.
All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of The Ever to Conquer. My name is Jamie Grant, your host. Thrilled to be with you again today. Super excited, again, continuing the trend of having a friend with us today, Bradon Rogers, who is the Chief Customer Officer at Island, Island.io, if you're looking to do some homework. Bradon, thanks a ton for coming to join us today, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Jamie, always good to be with you.
So, you know, this podcast touches kind of the whole ecosystem of tech, policy, procurement, really kind of aimed at the public sector. But if we're going to make partnerships happen in the public sector, it means bringing really talented, experienced people from the private sector to say, you know, how do we align the needs of these two groups and how do we figure out if there's a fit? And if there is a fit, how do we get all the way through that funnel? So I like to kind of start just a little bit about your background, right? So we've got some folks that'll listen to this that are trying to figure out one day what they want to do corporately. They're in the private sector and they're trying to figure out where they're trying to go. Or folks that are in the public sector, they're going to spin out. We'll get into, and I'm really excited to have the conversation around what a chief customer officer is, why it matters. But will you give just a little bit of your background so folks understand your history and then kind of how you become a chief customer officer?
Yeah, so I first of all, thank you for having me, Jamie. I really appreciate it. And it kind of goes all the way back to my days, our shared days, I guess, at Auburn. I was at a junction point in my college journey, trying to decide what the major is going to be, and I wound up getting an MIS degree. And I don't know that I had any real particular interest in tech. I had to find a path, and I knew that obviously, when I was going to school, the internet was a baby, and it just seemed like it was a really good place to be future-proof. And, I was very fortunate to have some jobs right out of the gate, in development, doing engineering work, writing code. And I found my way in, via some relationships, via Auburn relationships, actually. I went to work for Oracle and got my first taste of working in a technology company, a software company. And also got my first taste of touching large enterprises and starting to understand the demands of an organization, how they operate and what they expect of their technology providers. And, I got to spend a lot of time with a lot of the biggest companies on the planet when I was working for Oracle. And, one thing led to another. The people that I knew at Oracle went to work at another company. I went with them. And next thing I know, I'm in cybersecurity. And I've spent a nice 20 plus year career in cybersecurity and working for some of the largest orgs on the planet. But I've been, found a really pleasant journey where, I'm a technologist by heart. I really enjoy the tech. I like trying new things. I like the challenges that it presents to you. I like the intellectual stimulation of the technologies. And that's always kind of been my thing when I work at the companies, is to stay on the technology side of the house. And, as I continue to grow my career, working my way around in the sales engineering role, which is great because it's kind of this balance between, a selling role where you're spending time with customers and helping them understand and demystify the technologies and speak the language they speak so they can actually understand it, but also being deeply technical on the other side of the fence, again, and be able to help dissect some of these things and make sure they have a clear understanding at the deep technical levels. And just over years, one thing led to another in the process where, I just spent a ton of time with practitioners and the organizations I work within, and, continue to grow my career through that process. And got my first taste of leadership teams, in the leading teams in that process, and was a terrible leader out of the gate, and learned how to be somebody that I hope that would be somebody people would like to work for, that they would enjoy working for, that sets high expectations and lofty goals, but at the same time is an empathetic leader, and learned a lot about that over the years. And at the end of the day, it's a natural progression, because at the end of the day, the job of an engineer in the field is to make sure you're shepherding the customer to solve the problem they've laid out in front of you, and make sure on the other end that, they feel like you had their back throughout the journey, and you build these trusted advisor relationships. And that's exactly what I'm doing now at Island in the role of Chief Customer Officer. It's I spend a lot of my time hands in the tech, a ton of my time hands in the tech, and right in front of some of the biggest practitioners on the planet, and letting them pressure test the tech, and as they're learning the new category that we've built, they're navigating it, trying to understand it, trying to demystify what it is and what it isn't. And at the end of the day, on the other end, I own the journey of not only their decision to make the leap to become an island customer from a technical standpoint, but also in the consumption of it. So at the end of the day, whatever we promise on the front end, we've got to make sure we deliver on the back end, so we live up to the promises that we made on the other end, and we hold ourselves accountable to that on the delivery. So that's the best part of my job, is I get to work with some great people, some really talented practitioners. I've made a ton of friends in the industry over the years, and very fortunate to say that we've got a lot of great people inside of Island, and many people inside of Island, a ton of people inside of Island I've worked with for 15, 20 years at this point. So a lot of great friendships. And for me, it's almost like this cool thing where there really is no dividing line between work and where my friends live. They're literally in both places, which is great.
So one of the things I love that you just touched on, I'm huge on tensions between two competing forces, right? Like where there's like a pull one direction and a pull a different direction. One of the things I love about your story is a lot of times I feel like the chief customer officer kind of comes up through the customer success vertical that's maybe a little more, a little less technical, let's say, right? Where they're really good at triaging and routing and bringing the resources to the table. But I think there's this like polarity between being an engineer and also then being a chief customer officer, where there's an appreciation for the limitations and the power of the tech. There's the honesty and the accountability of either the tech does it or it doesn't, against kind of like the warmth and grace and empathy that it takes to really be a great chief customer officer. And I think that's a really cool part of your story. I want to ask you a question, going back real quick to something you said. You referenced, like, we all, I think, in leadership roles early on, we think we're ready to lead, and we're like, if you had a couple of things, or is there one big thing that you would look at that you go, man, that is the one lesson I learned the hard way about leadership when I first got exposed that way?
Well,
Or if you describe when you say maybe you weren't the leader you would have wanted to work for as an early leader in your career, and now you very clearly are with the team that follows you and the longevity that's there, is there something you could share that somebody would go, man, I don't want to make the mistake Bradon made, and learn from that?
I think, one of the first things as a leader out of the gate, when you first jump from individual contributor to leadership, it's natural to try to do the job of the people that you work with and the people that work for you. It's natural to try to do the job for them. And there were many times I would just jump over the top of people to just do the job, because in my head, I guess I'm doing it better. I don't know. Maybe there's a little young ego involved in some of that as a young leader. But you have to learn to trust people. And obviously that trust is earned on both sides of the fence. And, people are going to make mistakes. And there may be, it's like getting to a destination on the road. There could be 10 different paths to get to that destination. Just because you take the certain path. It's funny, because I'm sure my wife and I have argued about this a million times as we're driving the streets of Auburn. She goes, "Why do you go this way? I go this way." And it doesn't matter. We both get the same destination. And early in my career, sometimes maybe I probably was a little bit too stiff about the direction that it took to get to the destination. And there could have been some alternate paths that might have even been better. And, what I did, I began to loosen the reins and just open my eyes to the fact that, while I was learning as an individual contributor from the job I was in, I was growing every single day. I began to learn from the people that worked for me in the process, and be able to find common ground. And I think that's one thing as a leader. A leader hopefully has an even temperament, but at the end of the day finds the way to be a broker between, sometimes it's the tech, finding the problem and matching the tech to the problem, but also between people and trying to find, sometimes there's tense conversations, and, at the end of the day, you become a little bit of an arbiter sometimes, and ultimately a decision maker after you hear all the facts. But, I think at the end of the day, that's, to me, that's probably one of the biggest learning things for me, is like being able to take my hands off the wheel and trust people that work for me, that they built a career too. Those people are great at their jobs. They're really intelligent, smart people. And, and most of them I found over my career are smarter than me in the first place. So, So that being said, I do think that's that hands off the wheel thing, and it's a trust thing that you learn to develop over time.
I love that. I have battled in my career, and I think I realized it a year or two ago, maybe a little bit longer. I guess it was still while I was in the CIO chair. I almost subconsciously choose to delegate, and it's like binary with the amount of trust.
Hmm.
And so I've gotten to a place where when I trust somebody, I don't want to be involved. We talk about one-way doors, two-way doors, like the two-way door of if you can, if you asked me, do I need to wear a jacket? You didn't need to interrupt my day. You could walk out the door, figure out if it was cold, walk back in,
Yeah.
grab a jacket. I don't need to be in your business.
Yeah.
But then sometimes there was one-way doors, right? A product shipping,
Yeah.
major things are one-way doors, and like let's get together and talk about it. But as I really tried to like look inward on it, I started realizing that I am a terrible like put my hands on it, do the work, come over the top when I don't trust.
Yep.
And so trying to really learn how to build that trust, because I think you're spot on. Like it's hard as a leader when you want to delegate and want to trust, but you're constantly having to play cleanup, or you're constantly having to kind of undo, redo. And it's like, all right, how do you find the time to both coach and grow your team and delegate to your team? But I think where that trust comes in, it frees up a leader like you to just go, hey, go do your job. You're here for a reason. We trust you. We're empowering you. But to me, I don't know if it relates or resonates for you. To me, it's like I don't want to micromanage, and 100% of the time when I go, wait, why am I so deep in something that I shouldn't be that deep in? The answer is
Yep.
always like, I don't trust this person right now. So how do I build that trust so that I can get out of their way? That frees me up. It empowers them, and you watch them just grow so quickly when that happens.
Yeah, it is trust is an interesting part of it. When you're building a team from scratch, or you're hiring people from within an existing team, you got to try. You got to do a good job of. It's on you as the person doing the hiring to hire people that are capable, that can come in and do the jobs that you need. So again, if you can be on you to make bad decisions on that front at the end of the day, and they'll let you down right out of the gate, from a trust standpoint, because you made the wrong decision and the wrong hire. There may be somebody that didn't fit the role or fit the situation, both for the company and for them. And but I think the hiring thing is a big part of it, because when you bring people into the team, you hopefully vet the right people out that fit the culture and the mold of the tech and the things that you want. And as you do that, right out of the gate, there's a little bit of earned trust just by getting in the door. And then at the end of the day, you let people go off, and it's like a kid with training wheels. At some point, you take the training wheels off, and you let them scratch their knees up a few times, and sometimes give them loves and hugs, and sometimes you give them some tough love in the process. But to me, but one thing I think is really important is trust is a two-way street. So as they earn your trust, you have to earn their trust as well as a leader. And part of that is, like, for me, it's a really big one to be, I try not to ask the people that work around me to do jobs that I'm not willing to do myself. So you'll see me get as deep into the tech, as an example, as I ask some of my engineers. I got engineers that are way better than me in the tech, but at the end of the day, I challenge myself all the time to be deep hands-on into the tech at a senior level in the organization, because I'm going to ask these people to do this, and I want them to be able to see me in front of a customer taking the hard questions, the challenging problems, et cetera, just like I'm asking them to do. And but I think that hopefully that earns a little bit of trust in the process as well, of them seeing I'm capable of doing it. But also at the same time, I've got to grow my skills as a leader. Starting out, there's new muscles I've got to develop. So it's like, so I do have to take my hands off the wheel somewhat, because there's only so much capacity you have at the end of the day if you're going to grow your skills as a leader. So again, there's some balance in all of this, but at the end of the day, the trust being a two-way street is really important, because having my teams trust me. One thing I learned a long time ago, I think is really important, is, as a leader, you have this imagination of what the culture is in your organization, and you imagine what it is. And, sometimes you work in an org where people tell you all kinds of great things about you, about your teams, et cetera. And what you really hope isn't happening is there's an alternate culture actually happening beneath the surface. And the alternate culture beneath the surface is the opposite of what you think. That's terrible as a leader. You're being fed bad info. You're everybody's saying all the right stuff, but not telling you what the real situation is. And while you'll never be deeply, perfectly aligned and in tune down to the microscopic detail in the culture, you don't want to be out of a room and then the room changes and says totally different things than it would say when you're in the room. And what you're hoping for is the culture you think it is versus the culture that it is are really tightly overlapped. And, trust and many of those things go into that. And again, being close to your people, empathizing with them, being able to do the jobs that you're asking them to do in the process, be able to step in front of them and take the hard shots when sometimes the hard shots come so that they're not the ones having to take it. They see you having their back in that way. And then sometimes it's making hard decisions about sometimes that, where there's not a good fit in the org, because at the end of the day, sometimes that can be detrimental to others in the org that are having to pick up the load in the process. So, there's a lot of tough things that come with being a leader, but at the end of the day, I'm proud of the development that I've gone through over the years, and I've still got a lot more to go at this point.
So you touched on so many good things there, and I'm going to try and recall them. But one that I almost interrupted you to ask, and then you went straight to it, is when you talked about the training wheels and you talked about the fact that we're going to have some skinned knees. One of the things I've struggled with as a leader is how do I build a culture where the right kind of mistakes are encouraged, right? Be a liar, be a fraud. That's a character issue, not a mistake. Like we got a zero tolerance on that policy. But then inside of that, I need the team to play fast. I need the team to take risk. I need the team to be curious and innovative, all those things. And so we can't discourage mistakes. I also can't have the same mistakes over and over because that's a problem. And so I'm curious if you have something on how you've kind of institutionally or in very large organizations where I got a lot more flexibility in our team than you do. How do you coach it? How do you get them to understand hey, we'll get in the film room. We're going to watch the mistake. We're going to coach the mistake. We're going to prevent that mistake, but I can't let you walk out of the film room scared to make a mistake on the field tomorrow.
Yeah, really good question. First of all, I'm going to carry your parallel on because you mentioned the film room. You think about it, when you're preparing for a game, you don't just sit and watch film. You actually go to practice. And I don't know what the ratio of practice to games is, but it's probably a substantially heavy tilt toward practice versus games.
It's got to be 10-1 when you take spring ball, take 2-a-days. It's got to be 2-1, 10-1.
Exactly. So you think about it, you can create environments in the places where you work, which simulate the real thing. Now again, you're never going to get, I'll use our Auburn analogy. You're never going to get the feel of what it's like playing in front of 90,000 people in Jordan-Hare Stadium on a game day Saturday at a practice field. But what you'll do is you'll train yourself repetitively over and over. This is what a given motion looks like. And that's super, super important. And you can do that in the workplace by gamifying things out, by practicing. Like in our world, when I talk to sales engineers, practicing the demonstration of the technology, getting comfortable with it, how you talk about it. I can't tell you how many times I've been in hotel rooms at midnight practicing for the presentation the next day, saying the words over and over again, turning it into something that I can commit to memory and feel comfortable with what I'm saying versus ad hocking it up. And sometimes it's okay to ad hoc stuff up like this conversation here. But I think practice goes into preparation. And by the way, you mentioned film. Go back and watch the film. Like if you're going to, my people are going to record a demo. If you're going to do a demo, record yourself doing the demo and then go watch yourself awkwardly delivering it to see what you think about it. But there's ways to be prepared for when you go into the real situation that you'll scratch your knees up a lot less. It doesn't mean you don't want to encourage that. I'll come back to that in a bit, but it doesn't mean you don't want to encourage that. But at the end of the day, there's preparation that can go into it.
Yeah, I love kind of the notion of if it's not instinct down Magnolia on the fields that nobody's watching, it ain't going to be instinct on Saturday. And when all the distractions and all of a sudden something goes awry, it's got to be baked in and the fundamentals have to be kind of there. So let's real quick, I want you to set context. If you were to explain Island to my 80-year-old saint of a mother who still doesn't understand what I do, can you give me a really quick synopsis? And I know we're going to get into it a little bit around the customer experience stuff, but for folks who maybe haven't yet heard of one of the fastest growing software companies in the history of the world, what is Island doing?
Yeah, so the thesis is, if you think about the most pervasive way that in a history of my technological career and in history of yours as well, the most pervasive way we've consumed applications is with a web browser. Now, herein lies the dilemma with the web browser we all use. The browser we all use isn't built for the purpose of practitioners and delivering apps. It's actually built for shopping. It's actually built for targeted search, advertising and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, it's a consumer grade need. You think about the needs for consumers, like if you go to the Indy 500, you're not going to see people rolling around the track in a minivan. Totally different purposes in the vehicles that are needed there. But I think the reality is that we've stood up this experience that's very ubiquitous. Your average end user in the organization knows how to use a web browser. But at the end of the day, it's not built for the purpose. So here's the dilemma. You start having to stand up an immense amount of infrastructure around it to deliver apps to the end users, to make the corporate environment, empowered. You stand up virtual desktop infrastructure, VPN infrastructure, a massive cybersecurity stack with proxies, DLP CASBs, SASE technologies, all these other things. And the reality is when we stand all that stuff up around it, we take that great experience that the user knew and loved in that browser and we just ruined it. We just made it exceptionally difficult to access applications, the experience. We're streaming pixels oftentimes with VDI. And so we said, look, what if we could rethink this whole thing and take advantage of the user's know-how in using a browser and build the world's first browser built for the enterprise. We call it the enterprise browser, and transform the browser into a true application delivery platform that makes every engagement safe while providing access to the key applications for the users to do their job, and then empowering them to be more productive with things. Obviously, AI is a huge conversation right now, but empowering them to be able to take advantage of tools to make them more effective at their job and be able to automate many of their workflows in the process, but give them easier access. Just simplify the entire experience for the user. Let them feel like the internet. Make them feel like the way they work, it works exactly the way the internet was originally designed.
Yeah.
Like it happens at your home at night.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm gonna, cause I want to go from there. Now I want you to explain to my mom what a chief customer officer does, but I want to come in here for a second first, because, I go back to that tension you have, and a healthy tension of being both an engineer and a chief customer officer, and trust, and kind of bring this together. Because if we made a different parallel, sales is really good at walking into the bar and getting dates, right? They're really good at saying what needs to be said to get a date. Marriage is different. And when you're in that chief customer officer role, really, like the purchase order is kind of the beginning of the relationship almost, that like we've earned the opportunity to have you as a customer for a long, long time. And we're going to earn that if we can build the trust. But, I've had some co-founders in the past. One comes to mind that like every time we were in an enterprise room pitching and we got asked, does your platform do that? The answer was yes. It didn't matter what the question was.
Right.
And then he was going to come back to the dev team and go, hey guys, roadmap updated. Here you go. And so that was problematic for a lot of us, right? And then simultaneously, if you didn't have kind of the structure and standards, and I'll say the good part of rigidity in the go-to-market motion, that say, hey, sorry, we actually don't do that. We're not the fit for that. How would you explain a chief customer officer? Because I see you sitting at the intersection of trust with the customer, but also the whole team at Island has to trust you, that when you come back from an engagement forward-facing, and you're kind of reporting the news or giving the sales-led product market fit data to go like, wow, this isn't really landing with the customer, or this isn't working for the customer. One, I'd love for you to tell me if you think I'm crazy in that regard. But two, just to kind of explain what a chief customer officer does. And then I want to kind of get into why I think it's a tragedy that the public sector doesn't have that role pervasively through agencies and enterprise that have taxpayer-facing or constituent-facing applications.
Sure. I think at the end of the day that, in short, the role of a chief customer officer is to drive an outcome. And, buying a piece of software is not an outcome. Making a piece of software pivot to be used to solve a problem that you stated at the beginning of the journey with a vendor or with whatever situation you're in. You stated a problem at the beginning. You want someone to grab that and go, all right, let me make the machinery work to your advantage. And that to me is the role of the chief customer officer, and ultimately the people that work in my org at the end of the day as well, is from the beginning of the relationship, we get to know the customer and we spend our time with the customer. We dive deeply into the problems they have. We try to understand the the ecosystem of technologies and the influences in their org and the politics and the policies and things like that, and try to get to know them. And again, you do a lot of this stuff in the sales process as well, early in the engagement. But what's interesting, especially about the org we've created, we've changed the model quite a bit from what traditional technology companies have built. In most technology companies, when you're engaged in the sales effort, you work your way through the sales effort, and then the customer transacts, and all of a sudden the sales team pulls back a little bit, maybe a lot of bit, and all of a sudden this professional services team parachutes in. And you had all this continuity. You broke bread with these people early on. You learned their environment, you learned their culture, their policies and process, and the things they need. And you also made promises to them. You told them how things would work. You told them the functionality and how it would be delivered and the scale, et cetera. And then all of a sudden this new team parachutes in, and they have none of that. They don't know what was said in the sales cycle. They don't have any relationships. They haven't had any dinners with these people. They don't inherently, back to the hiring earlier and all the other stuff about trust, there's no inherent trust for these people yet because we haven't built that bridge yet. And then, they work to hopefully get the technologies deployed in the process. And then there comes the point in time where they leave their organization after it's all stood up, after probably some teeth gnashing from time to time. And then there's another team now whose job is to support it. And that team knows even less about the customer. That team is ill-equipped. They weren't engaged at the beginning. They don't know these people. These people, these people on the customer side of the house or the organization side of the house are calling 1-800 to get help, and they're getting asked basic questions. I'm sure you've done this before. You call support somewhere, and they start asking you these simple questions like, have you rebooted your machine and all this other stuff, or have you checked your Wi-Fi router? And then you in your head you're going, at least for me, I was going early in my career, I'm a network engineer. Why are you asking me this? I already know this kind of stuff, but they don't know me. Right. They don't know not to do that. They're having to follow their playbook. So all that institutional knowledge is lost. And for me, and this is why the org is like this, but this is ultimately the role I'm in as well, is to live with the customer at the beginning of their journey and stay with them through the parts where they figure out whether it's a good mapping, good match for the problems they have. And then as they make the decision to say, you know what, we're going to put our trust in Island, in this case with us, but any vendor that I've been in, they make that decision to put that trust, rather than disappearing and another team parachutes in, we stay with them. So we leave the same people engaged that own the deployment and make sure the success happens. And again, at the end of the day, we still know all of their infrastructure and their people, and we didn't lose that continuity. And then we went to the support process, and guess what? Those same people stayed engaged to make sure those customers were white gloved throughout the entire journey. And again, the mission of the people that I work with is not just to sell them a technology, but it's to drive the outcome on the other end, to make sure that we live up to the brand promise that the customer was given from the day they began to engage the technology. And the same people now own that. And by the way, there's a heavy degree of accountability. You can think about your relationships in life, all the promises you made early in life that later you were held to account to live up to, because you're the same person. Somebody else didn't have to own the delivery of that. You had to own it. Same thing is true here. We believe that ensures that at the end of the day that, I know that if I say something early in the journey to the customer, I got to deliver it later on. I don't get to walk away from that promise I made. And that makes this very unique, because this goes back to the heart of the conversation we had earlier, trust.
I'm laughing because it was early on in my career, and we were having that challenge significantly. And as you know, we were dealing with really sensitive patient data in the healthcare space, and providers, doctors that were trusting us with their patient panel, which is effectively their livelihood, right? Like, I mean, you're talking really intimate stuff here. And we were having a real challenge between sales and the account management function and retention function at one point, and kind of got the sales team together. And I'm actually hesitating on whether I should say this, but I couldn't figure out how to drive it home. And I said to him one day, I said, guys, I need you to understand that there's this very intimate transaction happening here in business and personally when a doctor is giving us access to their entire patient panel and trusting us to make sure that the data and the caregivers are doing that work 24/7 when the doctor's not in the room. That's a really big leap for a doctor to take. And then simultaneously, a patient is giving us all of their medical records, which is obviously really sensitive. And I couldn't think of it. And I finally thought, guys, I don't know how to drive this home. But if you take the parallel of, guy walks into a bar and ends up having a one-night stand because he said all the things that it needed to say for a different kind of very intimate encounter to happen, And for that woman to think like, oh, I'm dating this guy now. And the next day he's like, no, you're dating my friend. It's account management. You're not dating me. I was just the one who got you into the relationship. But I'm going to hand you off and you're going to date my friend. And she's like, but I didn't get like vulnerable with your friend. I got vulnerable with you. And I thought kind of aligned. And then we had some more problems and we revisited. And I said, guys, now I want you to imagine that the one night stand turned into a pregnancy and there's now a situation and it seems hyperbolic and they are certainly not the same. But if we root it back into trust and we think about the fact that like the trust is built at the beginning to get to a purchase, simultaneously vulnerability happens between these two people that say, okay, I'll take this risk. I'll buy your thing. I'll trust my organization with you. And then you're gone because you got the yes, and they're stuck dating somebody they had no interest in working with, who had no understanding of how it brought together. And then this thing turns into a real situation with financial and operational implications. And it is hyperbolic. I'm like, I can't believe I just said that, but I use that to try and say, like, guys, I'm not endorsing any of the above, but you got to understand you're building a level of trust with somebody that is in a different way incredibly intimate when they're trusting you with their data, their livelihood, their operation. And we can't just go in and say what it takes to get the transaction and then pretend like there won't be consequences if we just hand the relationship off to somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll go back to your medical analogy. You know, if you go to that physician or that healthcare facility and you have a good outcome on the other end, maybe you had a scary moment in the middle of that and you have a good outcome though on the other end. When the next one happens, you're likely to go back to those same people, and you're likely to go back to those same people again, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, not only do they have your back, they're intelligent, et cetera, but you start developing relationships with them in the process as well. And relationships matter. And that same parallel translates to the work that I do. And that many people that I work around, that I'm blessed to work around, do the same exact thing. They'll keep coming back to you. I've got customers over the years that I've known at several different companies I've been at. They're willing to let us walk into the door and spend time with them because they trust us, because they knew we had their back in the past. And that's really, really important to me. And then breaking that, you can lose that in one set of bad decisions that you may regret later, but you tried your best to doggone and get it right every time.
I think this is audacious, but I also think it's accurate. And some people think I'm crazy on this. So I want to ask you if you agree. And it's one of the reasons I remember when we first met, 4 or 5 years ago. Shout out Brett Edens, thank you. I remember when you went to Ireland, I was like, man, that's pretty cool what they're doing. And I think the tech is what y'all are doing is really, really awesome. It's growing like it's growing for a reason. I think people buy people before they buy a product. Like, to your point, I think the reason people call you is, sure, they're putting trust in your judgment on product, but I think people are buying Bradon in that situation more than they're buying the product or the company Bradon's with. Do you agree, or do you think I'm crazy?
Well, no, I think there's something to be said for that. I do think that, me or others, anyone else for that matter, if I had a history of being great friends with them and taking them to dinner and everything else and getting to know them really well and then selling them junk technology on the other end that I said would do X, Y, Z, we wouldn't be friends for very long. And
That's
then
right.
they wouldn't engage me the next time. So they're willing to engage you because of the prior relationship, but because of the prior, I go back to that kind of concept of the brand promise at the beginning. Yeah. You made that commitment. You went through the cycles of whatever it took to deliver on it, and you proved that on the other end you had their back in it. It may not always go perfectly according to plan, and I've had situations in my career where something didn't deliver what I'd hoped it would deliver, but I was always transparent in the process with them, and I think that was really important because they were willing then to work with me again. And I'll be honest with you, we're very blessed here. I count my lucky stars. I get to work with so many people at Island who've worked with me at 2 to 5 companies. We got a lot of people. I'd say probably 70% of the people on my team have worked with me at least at one company before, if not 5. And if that same exact promise had been let down in the process, they probably wouldn't come join us again at the end of the day. And I don't blame them. And again, I wake up every single day trying not to let the people down that have entrusted us with their careers, because they're feeding small mouths, and they're keeping the power on, and building a future for themselves off of the things we do here. And I take that super seriously, and I'm grateful that so many people have entrusted us in that same way over and over again.
So I want to dive in a second to kind of tactically chief customer officer. I want to dive in on the public sector side, because I think one of the things that's fun about our conversations is we kind of meet at the intersection on a lot of things, from like opposite goalposts moving to the 50-yard line. I got a couple quick questions, and then one thing that I want to get off my chest, and I'm not going to ask how did you do it, because that would take us way far afield, so don't let me. But you touched on this, I'll say innovative or strategic, intelligent incentive alignment for the customer. How hard was it to get the compensation plan right? Because I feel like every time I have tried to kind of put that org chart together, there's some reason why somebody says, well, I can't take my salespeople out of the field. And I'm like, yeah, but they're also the knowledge that we need here in some regards. They can't completely helicopter out. Was it hard, and how hard was it?
Well, I think when you're thinking about compensation for yourself or for anybody else, you want to think about rewards you get for the things you're being asked to do. If you're being asked to do stuff that there's no reward for on the other end, you may not be willing to do it, or at least you won't do it well, because you won't. There may not be a motivation. And by the way, I think I'm very fortunate in my world that at least technologists, a lot of people I work with, they're motivated for a lot of things, and sometimes fiscal compensation, but a lot of people are intellectually stimulated. Like, they enjoy the tech, and there's a lot of people that won't. The pay could be great. If the tech sucks, they just won't want to work there because it's not fun to them. But I think you always have to try to find ways to align rewards with the things you're asking people to do in their jobs, and it has to be worth their while at the end of the day. I think in general that's what we've done here. It won't always be perfect. That's why you may do adjustments during the year, or you do adjustments next year. You may change things all around. But at the end of the day, for me, it's just a very basic thing. Is you look at the tasks at hand that you're asking people to do, and you try to align the way they get rewarded for those things based on those asks. And again, if there's something void in that, and you're asking them to do something, you might ask yourself, are you going to get a good outcome if you don't find some creative way? And in the universe of technology companies, sometimes those are part of base compensation. Sometimes there's one-off things you do that are give one-off bonuses, or in the world of sales, oftentimes they're called spiffs. But sometimes you do some one-off compensation things for people. But yeah, again, it to me it's a very elementary problem at the end of the day. And again, you won't always get it right. You just try to get it right, and you want your people to believe that you're making an effort, because there's no desire I don't think, at least here, there's no desire by general leaders for their people not to do well. The well-being of my people matters a ton to me.
I guess maybe part of it is I've always seen individual contributor sales models, and I just believe in a squad model more. Like, how do I build little units of complementary team sport? But it was always hard, because like I wanted to your point, show me the comp plan, I will predict the behavior. Like, over the statistical outlay, we're going to see exactly what the comp plan incentivizes. The second question I want to ask you real quick, that's kind of related to being a chief customer officer. It's a core function that you do. But I think this is one of the areas when I was talking about the public sector, private sector experience that you and I have and kind of jam out on sometimes. Have you ever seen, or how common is it? Like, let's say we express it as a percentage. How common as a percentage of opportunities where you've been really engaged in your career with a private sector customer, has there been a purchase before at least a solid, just baseline architecture or design, kind of the business process, technology process, operations process? I don't mean all the documentation, but like, how often would you see a purchase happen where it's like, yeah, I want that thing, now I'm going to pay somebody to do the design?
I would say probably 90% of the time, if not more,
that they're buying first.
Yeah, no, 90% of the time, the design is in the process, before the buy. Like, you're sitting in a room. I've been in many, many rooms before somebody's ever transacted, and we're laying out how this thing's going to function. We're getting on a whiteboard and drawing out the architectural layout. And sometimes it could be a little more informal. Sometimes it could be really formal and rigid.
Yep.
And many of the engagements we work within, architects from the organization will come in and want to get deep into it, because they're the ones vetting out, is this going to be, because our architecture is really, really important, because architecture will dictate how difficult something is to operate. It'll dictate sometimes cost and complexities and things like that.
Okay, so follow-up question. I'm leading here because I think I know the answer. How many times did you charge for that? Like, what did your customer pay for that?
Well, when you're selling something, never. That's part of the process. That's part of what you do. Like that's how you get someone comfortable with that. You know what you're talking about. Number one, that you actually are an expert in your given field. And at the same time, I think more for software companies and technology companies, that's just part of the selling process. Now, there are advisory firms where you're paying for their consulting skills.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay for that. And you bring them in as an expert, and they help guide you through the decisions and what kind of architecture make sense and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I'd say 100% of the time. I said 90 earlier. It's 100% of the time when you go in an engagement, you will do that. And if you don't, you probably won't be selling much of anything.
This is one of the things that blew my mind in the 3 years in government, like working inside the agency and the operation. It is the exact opposite. Like when the companies, when I talk to either boards or folks in venture or C-suite folks, they're like, how is the public sector that hard? And we'll kind of walk through the different, but like so many times we find it is literally just an inverted mirror. Whether it's the incentive structures, the process, whatever it is almost inverted. And that was one of the things that blew my mind, is that design might be done 1% of the time pre-purchase. And you touch on how important the architecture is. And then we start to wonder, like, why do sales cycles take, 18, 24 months in the public sector where people are doing it kind of the status quo way? And it's like, man, they're going to the legislature. They're asking for millions of dollars for a feasibility study that's nothing more than a book report that somebody replicated from another state they did in it and did a control F to change states and a couple of names, hand in that book report, and then we're supposed to start. And it's like, guys, what if we just did like baseline design? And I think that is one of the biggest opportunities in the public sector right now, is for the buy side, the folks on the inside, to really focus in on design. And two, to make it clear that all the way from procurement process to the executives running the agencies, that like we can have transparent, accountable, and ethical partnership conversations around a whiteboard, metaphorically or literally, to map this stuff out and say, hey, how do we figure out if we're the right fit or not? But when you were touching on the design piece, I wanted to ask you, especially with your background, because we haven't really talked about that publicly much, but I mean, it is almost 0% of the time that when our team goes in to triage something in the public sector, that a design exists, that a user story exists, that any sort of that exploration. I think that's one of the biggest ways we can help the public sector. So, all right, Bradon, that was one of the more thorough and fun setups. And we really kept the Auburn references to a minimum, so I'm proud of us. No promises the rest of the way. All right, now here's what I want to
do. They're Easter eggs throughout both of our.
That's exactly right. Look, if you want a great culture, let's just set this state. Let's land here. Anybody, I asked you leadership and lessons learned and whatnot. I'll die on this hill. Anybody who wants to have an absolutely elite culture in their organization, go read the Auburn Creed, go take Auburn out of it, and implement that in your organization, and you will watch your culture transform.
100%.
Everything we talked about is there, which is one of the reasons.
We had to memorize in college for a reason. So
one of my favorite lines about Auburn, and I think that it kind of goes to the culture, is like, if you love Auburn, she will love you back. And I think, as I'm older in my career now and people are like, man, you're a big Auburn fan. It's the old Pat Dye quote, like Alabama fans love Alabama football. Auburn fans love Auburn University. Yep. And it's just a university that changed my life. All right. So I want to get a little more tactical here. We've set the stage. You've got a network engineering background. You've been across the industry doing all sorts of stuff. You're in this holistic, kind of end-to-end, from awareness, engagement, conversion, purchase, deployment, retention, growth, kind of map for the customer journey from prospect to customer to better customer. Now I want to take you to the public sector and kind of drill down. I think I've said this to you before, but when I was doing my first reorg and I was at least theoretically responsible. I was accountable for a $120 billion organization. I was theoretically empowered to actually run it. And I knew I was taking over a dumpster fire. When I took the job, I did not know how bad it was. But I worked on kind of my first reorg, and kind of going back to where you were talking about, it's like, had 300 something employees at the time in the organization and ran a data center, and we're supposed to stand up cybersecurity and supposed to build the state's first enterprise data catalog. And it's like, okay, how is this org supposed to do this? What talent do we need? How do we situate this? I actually routed into the governor's office my first reorg, and I had a chief customer officer reporting to me, and they nixed it. They were like, "That's stupid. We're not a business." And I was like, "Man, this isn't about currency. This is about culture. Like, This isn't about a title. This is about empowerment and setting the expectations that the taxpayers, the agencies, the local governments we partnered with, the legislature, everybody was a customer of what we do if we would take a customer mindset." And I think, Bradon, one of the reasons I'm so fascinated around this conversation with you is obviously what you bring to the table. But two, I'm just convinced more than ever that one of the biggest reasons the metaphorical or literal experience at the metaphorical DMV or state agency is such a tragic experience is that the design doesn't happen. A chief customer officer would certainly be making sure that we're getting designs done prior to purchase. But it's almost like in government, we have the amount of money we have. We got a problem or a project we want to work on. We go buy the thing. We hope it works. The managed service does it. And then it's a dumpster fire 3 years later, and we start over and we do it again. I don't know if you think I'm crazy on this or not, but I think so much of it gets fixed when we have a customer culture. And when we have somebody that is responsible and empowered. They got to be together. I can't have you overly accountable if I'm not going to empower you, and vice versa. But I think where that function exists, we would watch a lot of government services transform, because that chief customer officer would both see. We have one of my co-founders. Her job is literally to be customer leadership. That means both leading us as a team internally, but leading externally. So many of these projects, Island, yeah, sure, you can transform the taxpayer experience, but you transform the employee experience overnight. But are we really having a conversation about who our customers are and who we serve and what that should look like? So that's the preamble. I'm going to set you up with this question, because you've had exposure to the public sector. Maybe just initial differences. Like, what do you see in your role when you're talking with a public sector organization that stands out to you as a difference than when you're dealing with a Fortune 100?
Well, sometimes you can definitely sense when you're talking to some of the people, they realize how hard the change is, and that it takes incredible stomach to push your way through it. And sometimes that is not worth the risk. So, someone said to me a while back, in a joke, but someone said to me a while back, there's a sign sitting on, all these people are investing into their state retirement or whatever the retirement system is. There should be a sign in some places that says "Quiet, we're vesting." That was just, but no, I say that jokingly. There's a lot of really, really hardworking people that work in public service.
100%.
And I will tell you, I'm sure just like the DMV experience that you mentioned a minute ago, they're not all bad, by the way. I think the one in Lee County's done a really good job here. They've actually re-engineered it. They've said it. Honestly, I went in the other day and it was a totally different experience. They thought about it, and it moves fast now.
I think, to interrupt you for a second, I think the DMVs are some of the best right now because they got plagued for so long that leadership finally said, stop. Change the experience. Our customers are the DMVs. I think that's a great point. Why I said metaphorical, because it's like the joke that lands or people get it. But I find those are often the most innovative shops because they have somebody coming to the desk. There is the pressure to perform. And finally, some leaders said, we can't keep doing the same stupid stuff over and over and thinking that. So sorry for the rant.
No, I go back to where I was though. There's a lot of motivated people in public service, but then they realize the system around them sometimes is so hard to fight through for change management, for innovation, for the next tech. there may be people that resist. And again, those are the people with the signs I just mentioned a minute ago, jokingly.
For sure. No,
That was a
they
joke,
exist.
by the way, to anybody. That was a joke to anybody listening.
And it was true if you're one of the minority that are that. Like, I think, Bradon, I'll cover you here for a second, because both of these things are true. And I say this over, like, I only had one job in government. I get there. I've heard the stereotypes, right? I was blown away at two things with my team. Number one, they were far more technically talented than I expected. Number two, they were far more mission driven over the population than there was. Now, there are bad apples that are trying to play the game of, I don't want to have to do work. I don't want to take risk. I felt a personal responsibility as the leader of the organization to make sure I got the battle axe out and had the shield to take the bullets, because these folks have been starved for so long to try and go fast, but they'd never had the protection, the insurance, and the assurance that it was okay to make mistakes, that we were going to have their back, and that we'd equip them with what they needed. But I don't even think, when we say incentive structures are undefeated, this is another one I talk about a lot when we're trying to get people to understand the public sector. In the commercial private sector, everything moves towards yes. It's pulling towards yes. The polarity goes towards yes. You can get promoted. You can earn more RSUs. You can vest faster. You can make President's Club. All of those things that you were talking about. I think until people realize that in the public sector, the reward for being innovative and problem solving is more work, same pay.
Yeah.
So like, why are we surprised that somebody who wants to be a great dad, a great mom, a great spouse, make their kids game, is not jumping in the war room next time there's a disaster? Because I found myself, and I had to look in the mirror, I would go find my most reliable people every time. And then I had to go, wait a minute. I'm not allowed to pay them more. I can't give them a percentage of savings. We can't return to them 20% of the value they just saved the state and the taxpayer, which is criminal, and we should be doing that. But until we incentivize getting to yes, everything pulls towards no. So now we have these buckets. One bucket is what we just touched on, right? Like, they're tired of getting punished with more work, same pay. Then you have that very small minority that do exist, that are just there to vest, and they're waiting to vest, and they know that if they take risk and it's bad enough that they could get fired, they're not going to take risk either. And so as a result, the totality of the incentive structure in the public sector pulls everybody to stay at no, rather than stay at yes. Couldn't agree with you more.
You lived it probably more than anybody, being the CIO of one of the largest states in the United States. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of great people who don't make a lot of money in public service, and they're there for the noble mission of doing it. Like, you think about the people in law enforcement, the people that work in public safety, people work as firefighters. They're school teachers. They're all paid well beneath what they really deserve for all the pain they go through and the risk for lives and things that they take. At the end of the day, they believe in the noble mission. There's a lot of great people in tech and other places as well that have that same mentality, that they want the system to be better, so they're willing to push through and change. But it's hard, and I'm sure I've never lived it. You've lived that experience far more than I have. But at the end of the day, I want to be there to help those people try to find a way to do something different that can make their constituents' lives better. And the constituents, I don't mean just the citizens, but I mean their departments that they serve in their organization.
100%.
So.
Here's an idea placeholder for you, and I'm happy to jam out with you on it. I did this on a personal scale, and it was highly effective. It doesn't scale. It's something I think every public sector leader should be doing. I also found my team had no idea what their market value was, right? These are people that almost historically started in the public sector, had never been in the private sector, had no idea what their skill set was actually worth, and had no education, onboarding, awareness of how to transition, because they are two totally different worlds. And I was very clear on a couple things. I told him, I said, you have permission at any point to walk in my office and say you've been offered a job that you're very interested in taking. And the only thing I ask is I get to negotiate your deal on your behalf. I get to go be the recovering lawyer and have some fun. But I want you to be able to come in here and have the conversation with me that says, hey, boss, I'm thinking about leaving. That's a scary thing to say, right? Because I may say, fine, get out. Yep. And so we were doing it kind of on a one-on-one basis. And we kind of looked at our culture of, where did our team go? Like, who was hiring from us? What did our coaching tree look like, right? 2, how many people, when we had vacancies, what percentages of vacancies were recruited by somebody that was inside of the digital service was a major one for me. But there's going to be a point where a few companies put together, and I have found nothing on this. The National Association of State CIOs, to my knowledge, unless they've stood something up, does absolutely nothing to offload a CIO for the private sector. They may help them get a job with a company that's a member of the organization, but there is no like institute that is kind of like, hey, we'll get you situated for the public sector. It was amazing how much that made a difference in our team when I or a couple others would spend time with them to go like, look, I get that you're thinking about that job. I think we can get you a better job that's better suited. Here's why I don't like that offer. Here's what they're actually asking you to do. Or, hey, I can't ask you to stay. That's a life-changing opportunity. Let's go get it for you. Because that culture recruits itself, right? Like it starts to go. But you're absolutely right. So let's, gosh, I could have these conversations with you all day. I want to drill in now to kind of land the kind of the last phase of this. We've touched on Island Enterprise Browser. We've touched on Chief Customer Officer, what that looks like. We've touched on public sector challenges and some of the holistic challenges there. When you're dealing, and I don't care public sector or private sector, because you probably have more data points on the private sector, but when you're doing, you said the word change management. I like to think of workforce empowerment because it's at least aspirational, rather than like, we're going to manage the change. Yeah. It's like, how about we just empower our people? So Island shows up. You're one of the 4 fastest growing software companies in the history of the world for a reason. The tech does this crazy stuff. You're now really investing in public sector and starting to look at what that looks like. How do you go about that kind of at a high level? And I don't want to take us too deep and take your whole afternoon, but how do you deal with what it looks like, to be able to sit down with a customer and go, yeah, we could effectively replace your VPN, or we could take your VDI spend here, or this is what we can do in the SASE space, or all these different things. Because you have this tool that has near infinite applications in the enterprise. What does it look like for you to go like, here's like we've discovered the pain point. We've validated that we can be really helpful there and would be a good fit. Now walk me through what it looks like a day in the life or a deal in the life of a chief customer officer to go like, what am I tactically doing to make sure this thing goes the way it's supposed to go?
Well, I think at the beginning of an engagement, and this is before someone's transacted or bought the technology, and this is super important to your point a moment ago. It's there's an old saying: if you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to nobody.
I love that.
So if this is a great piece of technology that like it's a very unique approach. It's like never been done before, and it does solve an immense number of problems. But the job of myself and my teams and the people I work around, it's our job to map the journey for the customer of what that looks like, and to identify. You mentioned pain point earlier. To identify something that's very painful in the organization. Don't try to identify everything and it doesn't. You don't have to turn on every knob and every switch in it for all the things that it could do. The key is identify something that's a really difficult pain for the organization. Go focus on that, and that may be a smaller audience of people right out of the gate. But go prove that you can deliver and meet the customer where their problem is, and on the other end, show them that there's an alternate path, a better way. But, a lot of customers have other technologies in place. You mentioned many things a little while ago. They've already invested in X, Y, Z, and I sometimes I like to make a little bit of a joke of when I'm speaking at shows. But if you think about the horse and carriage. The horse and carriage was a very modern mode of transportation at one point in time.
The hammer and the wheel was like groundbreaking innovation.
100%. Yes, exactly. So
the wheel itself. and then you had like the caveman, like, why do I need that? I can just carry stuff.
But that was the marvel of transportation at one point in time. And then, at some point, someone came up with the idea of an automobile. Mm-hmm. And, you had the Industrial Revolution, you had the mechanics of machinery, and you had combustion engines, and you had aircraft come along. And you now saw there was a new way. And you didn't look back and go, why didn't I take the horse and carriage today when I took that long trip to Tallahassee or wherever the heck I'm going? You didn't do that because there was a new way. But it's not. But the long-winded point here is to say it's not to say that people that use the horse and carriage were doing it wrong. That's what they had at their disposal at the time.
That's right.
And like I look at what we're doing at Island is a very different, is a very similar kind of change, paradigm change, in that there's an alternate way to do these, to solve many of these core problems, some of these very difficult things, and just let's demonstrate a way that's much more novel. But again, focus, back to your question, focus on something that's really, keep everybody focused, lay out the path that within that problem, here's the thing, here's the steps that have to be accomplished, and go nail those steps down and prove it on the other end and measure it on the other end that did you do it or not, and then go chew the next one off. But there's a map in every customer's journey through the tech that we have, and that's true probably with any tech. Our map's just exceptionally long of the things you could possibly do in the process. So we try to really stay focused. I think that's the key.
Have you ever seen, gosh, what is it? I'm drawing a blank. It's I think it's the Rogers theory of adoption, the 16% threshold.
I should know that by my last name.
I'll send it to you. You will enjoy this in your keynotes. It's a gift to you. But it basically breaks down segments of new innovation, and at some point you hit that 16%. And so, there were folks that hopped in the automobile when it showed up, and they were those first 2.5%. They're the people that waited in line for the new iPhone. They're the people that, whatever it was. But you get to that tipping point, and then you're gone. I love, when we teach minimum viable product, the wheel is a great example, right? Yeah. Because now it sits on a jet, and the wheel was the MVP at some point to help things get from point A to point B. So what would you say the biggest impact to Island would be, or a company, let's just generically, that has everything we've described? They have a chief customer officer. They have a very experienced, seasoned chief customer officer, a servant of a chief customer officer. They got all the things. If we ripped that out, if we played this in the inverse, right? We've talked about what happens to an organization, what's happening at an organization that does have a customer mentality and structured the right way. What do you think happens, like, tangibly, if that just disappeared and the same elite technical tool was being shepherded, deployed, and managed in kind of I'll say the status quo, because I don't think many companies are where y'all are on this?
Yep. Well, if I were to start with today, right where we are at this very moment, and we ripped it out, this idea goes on without us. And I say that because
I love that answer.
I think the genie's out of the bottle. Like, you're not going to cork this one back up. And so it'll be someone else that does it, but the genie's in the bottle. It's not coming back in. And as a result, I do believe, and I truly believe this. I see it happening all the time. I do believe in the next 5 to 7 years that every person in the workforce will be using an enterprise browser.
Agreed.
I do believe that to be the case. That being said,
and by the way, can I ask you, for accountability perspective, do you also agree that something will disrupt the browser afterwards?
Well,
because that's a hot topic right now, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm where you are, that if you're not using an enterprise browser today in an enterprise IT shop, it's borderline malpractice if you have the resources to do it and you're not doing it. But you get some of these folks, and it's a little bit of like the all-in crowd, and some of them that are. I typically think Chamath is first of all, he's brilliant, successful. Like, I got no room to step in the ring with him. But he shocked me when he was a little bit poo-pooing the enterprise browser, and I thought that's crazy, because I absolutely agree with you. Over the next decade, it is here. I don't know what would displace it, but I'm curious if you think of, because if you're saying what could displace us, it's also saying, how do we make sure we're not a dinosaur one day that gets gobbled up?
Yeah. Well, I think AI has made that pretty future-proof.
Yeah.
Let's look at this. You think about how your average user's consuming AI today. They're doing it via a browser interface. It is like, if you want to talk about the native home for a creature, the native home for AI is right in the browser universe. Now, you might think, okay, so you could go say, well, there's some standalone AI clients. Guess what they're built on top of? Yeah. They're built on top of a browser. So at the end of the day, the way users consume information will still be via that window. How it's delivered to them within that window may evolve. And in fact, the mechanics of how they engage to do their job will evolve. For example, we see this today just in a very basic way. People doing their job and they just pull a generative AI prompt up and start asking questions. And at the end of this, changing how they do their job. That'll start being woven more and more into the fabric of the workflows they engage to automate many of the common steps of things they would do otherwise. But that to me that's a very heavy browser centric thought process. Again,
I
the
agree.
content may be rendered differently on some of this. Maybe dynamic. There's a lot of discussion around AI supplanting the business logic layer inside of applications and things like that. But yet there's still visuals, and the human eye still will consume things.
I think this is, and we could do, gosh, there's so many ways I could go with you on these conversations. But I also think there's a fascinating thing that you kind of touch on there, that part of the reason I say malpractice is in kind of the traditional internet web-based application accessed by a traditional browser. If I was a secretary responsible for health data or criminal justice data or education data, and I had to deal with HIPAA, DIPA, FERPA, all the different things, there were ways for me to put a pretty rigid fence and make sure that that data only lived in certain databases accessible by certain applications.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things that AI has future-proofed the enterprise browser on the same way is now that the open web becomes a portal to go everywhere, I have near infinite exposure to HIPAA data or to FERPA data. That if I'm the CEO of an agency, I better have a plan in place to go, wait, if my team is able to access a free and open internet on their third-party device to access their subscription to any one of the AI the GPTs, the level of exposure is insane. It's super fixable and easy, but I don't know how you fix it without leveraging the browser.
100%. Now, first of all, let's go back to the thesis you brought up earlier, and this is totally true. You can wall things off today. That's very common. You wall things off. We put walls around all kinds of things. We put firewalls around things,
100%.
all kinds of controls. But all the things that, from a cyber standpoint, you think about what we do, we're bolting on these experiences. So there's an application provider that built some cool app with cool capability, and all of a sudden we surround it with all this junk. And then guess what happens? Oh, we protected it, but we gave the user a terrible experience in the process. And so the user now absolutely hates their job because the technology is part of the friction in their job and the things they have to do. And by the way, many times the frontline practitioners, the frontline people, they're not technologists. So you've forced them to learn how to use technology XYZ in the process that they're uncomfortable with. But it's just but again, I guess the point is you ruin the user experience in the process. Again, going back to what you said with AI at the end of the day, again, the whole goal of what we should all do is try to dissolve all those things that get in the middle that are the bolted on experience and try to drive the internet usage for the end user and the application experience back to the original design. When you go home at night and you go to your web banking app, your web banking site, there is no broker between you and the actual destination you're going to in the app, your banking site. There's nothing in the middle of that except for the wires and the telecom connectivity. You have a great experience. It's encrypted point to point, and you use a credential and you log in, you get a great experience. And then you come to work and we just jam all this stuff in the middle of it.
And I was about so what I was itching to just like throw in there is you're exactly right. They're not technical. They're being asked to learn something new, and they're being asked to use a tool that has been completely bastardized to operate in a way that it was not written to operate.
That's right.
I mean, it is an absolute perfect storm. All right. One thing I'm gonna get us to what we call the roundup. Have a little fun with you to close this out in a second. It's funny, we were talking kind of Easter eggs, parallels, all the things. I used to say all the time, you just touched on the security and operations or the security and modernization. But even at the baseline, like the balance between a CISO and just operations has been this historic standoff. And no CISO will really say this, but they may as well sometimes, the minority that are just the minority. They'll say, I'll just unplug everything. We'll be safe. It's like, well, the business has to run. Like, we still have to do stuff around here. And then simultaneously, operations is like, oh, we could do this and this and this and this. And there's no there's no mediation between the innovation, modernization, and acceleration of the business and balancing for security, which is why I'm so fast. I used to say all the time, my CISO was my defensive coordinator. His job was to make sure that the Russians, the Chinese, and the APTs did not put points on the board for us.
Yeah.
My chief data officer, my chief technology officer, some of the forward-facing things, that was my offensive coordinator function. Their job was to go put points on the board. And you uniquely will appreciate this, but during the Gus Bus years, that hurry up, no huddle was fantastic to put points on the board. But you went 3 and out and you had a defense suck and wind.
Yeah.
And I think what's important when you think about the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator is those two things have to have a head coach that sets a vision and says, guys, we're going to be really good at scoring points and keeping points off the board, but they can't operate in silos agnostic of each other. To your point, and I guess I'm going on a little bit of a preaching session here. To your point, the browser now becomes the thing that lets my CISO be really comfortable in the security posture of the operation and simultaneously lets my team, my operation, and my innovators use really cool stuff natively the way it was used, designed to be used, without all of these handcuffs and being in like technological bondage. And it just takes something as simple as the browser to go like, hey, we can mediate this for this to happen. And that's one of the things I've just been really obsessed with watching what y'all are doing. There was one other question I'm going to ask you, and feel free to say no. But as we roll out some of what we're doing on the content side, a lot of it's going to be aimed at helping public sector leaders who are on the inside, equipping them with resources. I would love to pick your brain at some point on like, what if we created a job description that you and I collaborated on that was the essence of the chief customer officer and translated for the public sector? Or just some of the core functions that if we could give like even a small little playbook that says like, here's the customer mindset for the public sector. If you're ever interested in doing that, I think there's just a fascinating opportunity to help people. And I just realized I didn't land the plane earlier when I was talking about kind of at scale. I want to make sure I capture this. When I was talking about kind of my team and how I would coach them next job and help them whatnot, I think there's going to be some companies that set up this institute informal that will fill the vacuum that is there to help educate public sector people how to transition from the inside to the outside. Almost like a little light curriculum playbook thing that says, here's the questions you should be asking. Here's the things you should be thinking. Here's how to negotiate. Here's what these things mean. Because Bradon, I tell you, man, there's so many talented people in the public sector like you've experienced that just don't have kind of the encouragement or the education or awareness to know how to make that transition. And I kind of thought it would be the National Association, but it's really just state CIOs, and they're really not focused on that. And somebody's going to fill that vacuum. So happy to help however I can.
That's cool. That's really cool.
All right, let's take you to the Roundup, have some fun, and get you out of here. So these are just, we ask kind of almost always the same questions. We rotate a few in and out, but they're really designed to kind of let you put kind of your exclamation mark both on Bradon the guy and kind of the personality. So if you had one piece of advice that shaped your career more than anything, what is it, and do you have somebody you'd give credit to on that?
I want to take this. I want to make this a very thoughtful answer. I gave a piece of advice on LinkedIn the other day, and I'm going to go away. This is probably the only advice I've ever given on LinkedIn. I honestly, I'm not one of those people who usually positing my just general thoughts. But
my account got owned the other day and stolen, so I don't have to worry about LinkedIn for a while.
There you go. All right. I wonder why I was getting some weird messages from you.
I got misgendered. I was like a 30-year-old looking like AE female. My phone blew up with some friends that were like, hey, man.
Well, they changed all kinds of stuff, huh?
They let me know they were there.
Well, that's interesting. In my career, I think one of the most valuable things for me, and this really probably worked out more personally for me, but this, many listening will go through this, acquisitions, being bought, having your company be bought. It's a scary time. That's like, oh my gosh, you don't know up from down. You're like, am I going to have a job on the other end of this? It's a very unsettling time. And at this point in my career, I think I've been bought 5 or 6 times at this point. But I figured out a formula for that. And I think, like I said, I posted on LinkedIn. The formula is really simple. It's be patient and keep your head down.
Yeah.
And I don't mean keep your head down and hide. What I mean, keep your head down and do your job really well.
Yeah.
And for me, I learned that early on when the first company I worked at that got bought, I just stayed the course, and I literally I made sure I wasn't a troublemaker. I wasn't complaining if the old culture was gone. The reality is there's that first year of the acquisition where there's the first year of that acquisition where your culture and the new culture of the company that bought you and your old culture, neither one of them's there. You're living this hybrid kind of miserable, not certain what it is thing. It takes about a year for that to settle. That's why I say the patience part. You have to be patient to let the culture settle. And then obviously keep your head down, because they're looking for, I mean, what the new company that bought you is looking for. They're looking for the people that are in or they're out. And I'll tell you what they don't want. The people that are out are the naysayers, the people that are difficult, the people that are grumpy about their old culture being gone, that are living in yesteryear. And I learned that through the first acquisition inadvertently. And then I put that to practice several times throughout my career. And I will tell you what happens is when you get acquired, then at that point, a lot of people start falling out. They leave, they quit, they get sent somewhere else. They don't have a job anymore. And that creates opportunities for you because there's gaps, there's places to fill those voids. And every single time that happened to me, my career jumped up another notch or two in the process. And I got better and better at my job. Number one, by being patient and keep my head down. But at the same time, I also got recognized for that by being seen as somebody who wanted to be there, who was excited and enthusiastic. And it wasn't false enthusiasm. I mean, certainly there were times of misery and uncertainty and things and doubt in that, but that just paid off. And every single time, the situation improved for me on the other end of that.
I love that answer. The thing that I was blown away, one of the things that blew me away in the public sector, it's really easy from the outside to go, well, like M&A is just a private sector thing.
That's right.
It ain't. It happens in government every year. I get agencies that are split up. I get teams that are sent to a different agency. So I candidly didn't really think about this when I first kind of said publicly, and this just shows you how naive I was on some things. I was clear. I was like, why am I running a dumpster fire of a data center that's a cost suck, that's a legacy thing that government can never allocate the appropriate CapEx to? One legislative session goes wrong and you got real problems. I'm like, get this thing off my balance sheet. Mm. Well, what I was really telling a number of people in my organization was, I don't want you. And I hadn't thought of it, right? And so I go to the legislature, I convince them to outsource it, and I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And then I spent probably, 6-9 months managing an M&A from one side, having to let people know, like, guys, we don't have all the information. We're waiting on to know how many heads we got, how many dollars that, payroll, all the things. Happens every day in government. And it was eye-opening for me to kind of in the midst of it have to have that realization, because I had experience with M&A in the private sector. And, the thing I would say for anybody who's not familiar with how that process goes, if we just strip it down, whether it's raising capital or a liquidity event, there's a spreadsheet that is, who do I got to keep? I think if I added to your point, Bradon, it's be patient, keep your head down, but lean into the fact that you made yourself invaluable before.
Yep. That's right.
Because that event really just lets a report card come up where the buyer is asking the seller who is absolutely invaluable for this thing to keep going. Right. And it's a moment of truth that, it does create tons of opportunity. The people who tried to make themselves unfireable by keeping stuff close to the chest and not being team players, I don't see them survive very often in the liquidity event. But the people who were team first, bought in, made themselves invaluable, was patient, put their head down, ended up in a promotion in that new org who said, I've heard you've done awesome things. Teach me how you're doing it. 100%.
That keep your head down part to me, again, just to repeat, that is not go hide out and disappear and don't be noisy or anything. It's keep your head down and keep your nose to the grindstone and really show that you're valuable.
Yes.
It is just
100%.
Demonstrate your value. But while you're demonstrating the value, demonstrate your enthusiasm for being a part of it. And because I'll tell you, that's what people want around them. They want enthusiastic, positive people around them. Through an acquisition, sometimes it's really painful and hard to be that person. So you're working around a lot of people who are grumpy and unhappy about the change. But I look at jamming of cultures together, and you mentioned state agencies as a perfect example of this. It will probably take a good year before you're kind of living in this weird non-culture thing. It's not one thing, it's not the other, and it's so unfamiliar, it's uncomfortable, and nobody knows the processes on either side. And then all of a sudden, one day, you're like, wow, this is a great place to be.
Yes.
And I'm happy in my job. And a lot of the naysayers left, and I got a promotion in the process or something better situation. So that really worked out well through every one of them for me.
On that part, just to wrap that one up, I heard, I think it was Eric Schmidt, but it was a panel on a podcast I was listening to a couple years ago. And I'm a big believer that whether it's as a startup, you probably have a year to establish your culture, those core principles, but at some point it's baked in concrete and it's really tough to bust it up, right? So good culture, going to get baked in, bad culture, going to get baked in. It's important. But I think it was Eric, it was a panel he was on, but they were talking about when you have a promotion or a merger or a something, a new leader inheriting, that you have like that 6 month, I can't remember if it was like 6 or 9 months where it was like, this is your opportunity to bake the culture with a team you've inherited, no matter how you've inherited. And then it's going to take that, kind of in aggregate year to get there. If there is, if you stay at a friend's house and you don't have the choice of asking, you come to Nashville, hang out, stay in the guest room, and I'm gone and you get up, do you strip the sheets or make the bed?
Oh, strip the sheets every time. Somebody else got to sleep in that bed.
So I'll tell you the story this weekend.
Now, ideally, if you're a good host, you may tell me where the spare sheets are, that if you're not in town, I can go make the bed up too. I'll make it up with the fresh sheets. But that's 100%. Like I don't know. I don't know a lot of people that want to sleep in a bed that some other person slept in before, unless again it was their spouse or something like that.
Or why am I making the bed for the host to have to unmake it?
Yeah, exactly right. Because that's what's going to have to happen.
Yes.
Or the ultra insensitive host is going to go, I made the bed up. The next person won't know.
I'll tell you what's funny out of this question. There's a long tail story behind that question, but it is fascinating how there are geographic answers to that question. And I could have predicted, 100%. It's been really funny. If there is a book or a band or a show that you think the world should know about that isn't talked about enough,
I'll tell you, the show is the Eagles at the Sphere.
Okay.
You want to talk about going to a show? I mean, like, it's not fireworks and anything. It's just 30 songs, every single one of them. Like
is the Sphere as good as that? I haven't done it yet. Is it as good
amazing.
as it?
I've been twice. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I saw U2 there, and I saw the Eagles, and the audio visual experience is incredible. Like, I encourage anybody to get, like, you don't have to be I'm not a huge Vegas person. That's worth going to. That's worth going to. Like, I'm a terrible gambler. I don't gamble, so I just, I got friends that are great at it, and God love them. I just can't do it. I'm not great at it. So, but the Sphere is it's a really cool experience, and whether you like, I think there's all kinds of bands going through. There's Zach Brown band, and there's the Backstreet Boys, who I won't go see. But I think the Eagles are coming back. That is definitely worth seeing. And the Eagles I love because, it's not just me, but I think they're kind of like an American songbook. For sure. You'll go there and you will know 100% of the songs. If you don't, you'll know 90%. And that's the show. Like, going to a show and you hear an artist play a bunch of songs you don't know, you're like, this sucks. And they've saved their greatest hits for the end, like the last 5 songs. This is just the show, the entire show is songs so it's cool.
I couldn't name, I'm probably going to get, flamed for this. I couldn't name 5 Eagles songs. I bet I could sing along to 25.
Yeah. Guarantee.
Right? Like,
guarantee.
All right, so we like to have some fun with this one. If you have one hot take that's like your most controversial take that you're just convinced should not be a hot take, that it should just be mainstream, do you have anything that you think is like, I don't understand why people... Example, I don't understand why pineapple is the only topping singled out for like adjudication of whether or not it's appropriate on pizzas. I don't care if you don't like pineapple. But like, why did we pick pineapple for the one that we have to like single out? Daylight savings has been one. But do you have like this thing that at your, sitting with customers' dinners where it's like, yeah, I don't understand why this is controversial. This is pretty mainstream. but it's
Oh, the
not.
daylight savings time was a really good one. I mean, I'm like, man, golly, why do we do this? And it really stinks, living in Auburn,
Whew,
because it's like the worst thing in the world here. Because for those that are
right on the
watching that
line.
don't know where Auburn, Alabama is, like we're 15 minutes across the time zone from the Eastern time zone, so it's getting dark here at 4 o'clock, 4:30 p.m. and it's 1 hour later, it's 5:30 p.m. just 15 minutes down the road, so they get an extra hour of daylight. You know, during the summer, spring, and in winter, it's terrible here. So yeah,
It's just
that's
proof there is no perfect place, because without that, Auburn, Alabama would be the perfect place.
yeah, yeah. Man, you threw me on the spot on that one. I don't know that I've got a great one for you,
All
Jamie.
right, we'll skip it. We'll
Yeah,
skip
the
it.
daylight savings time will probably
The
be a good
other
one.
the other one we do as a backup that sometimes is fun is in like a good way. What's the
Oh, yeah, I give
wildest?
you a hot take. I don't know how
Yes.
anybody likes the beach. Like getting on the like. Listen, I love sitting at a beach house looking at the ocean. The idea of going and getting the sand all over your crap. You're tracking it back in the house. It's everywhere or whatever. I like being out on the back porch, and I'm a lake guy, so I go to Lake Martin all the time. So I don't have to deal with a lot of sand. But yeah, I never understood the beach. I love looking at it. I love going down to the coast. I love the restaurants and everything. But going out on the sand and sitting out on the sand, that's miserable to me. Like I want to sit on the back porch and stare at it and listen to it.
Brayden, you just nailed it. That's the
So,
best. That's the best one we've had. All right. So last one before we get to our final closeout. If your team could play a walk-up song for you as you walked up to the plate in the office, when you walked in the office, if you could, like, if they picked your walk-up song or if you picked your walk-up song, either way, what would Bradon Rogers' walk-up song be as he came into the office every day?
before our friends up in Tuscaloosa ruined the song "Sweet Home Alabama," like a lot of shows, that would be it because everybody around the world knows it. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like my friends in Israel and my
Yep.
friends in the UK, they all know it. And but now I can't hear that song anymore. Like I want to. I'm sorry for those listening if you lean toward that side of the state, but I want to vomit when I hear that song now.
It's
Um,
bad. And all the little riffs of like the commentary. It's no
yeah,
longer the boys from Fort Payne singing.
yeah, exactly. I'm not a big fan of that song like I used to be. Like I wouldn't ever like I say I wouldn't blare it in the car.
I'm gonna hang on. I'm gonna alter this question for a second for you, specifically for you. If you could pick one hype man, I don't care about the song. If you could have a hype man that was like introing you as you walked into the office, who's the best hype man you've ever seen that you would want to be your hype man?
Man, Kid Rock's a pretty good one.
Okay,
Like,
I like it.
if you've ever been to a Kid Rock show, I mean, I've seen him a couple of
I like
times,
it.
and I'm telling you, that dude can scream, and he's intense, and the whole 9 yards, and like, um, you know, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Wolf of Wall Street,
I'm not going anywhere.
Jordan Belfort, yeah,
Yeah.
he'd have been a great one. That character, at least, I don't know if in real life he's like that or not. He would be a good one.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I thought you might go somewhere I would go. I think the world's greatest hype man I've ever seen is Takeo Spikes.
He's pretty good. Yeah, that opening video coming in the stadium is pretty incredible.
Takeo's
No doubt
pretty good.
about it.
All right, so we close out with this, and this one's kind of fun. So every guest gets to answer a question left for them by their last guest, and then gets to leave a question for the next guest. So the guest that preceded you, real good buddy, Ray Rodriguez, was in the legislature with us, and now is the chancellor of the university system in Florida. And since you are a man, we'll keep it the way it was written. It was either king or queen. If you were king for a day, and you could make up any public policy to become law, what's the one public policy you would implement as King Rogers?
Man, I stole the one I would have said, honestly. I honestly would have said daylight savings time right out of the gate. I'd kill that like tomorrow afternoon.
That's a totally acceptable answer because you gave us another hot take. I stole your hot take, so that works.
I'll go with that one because that's that literally. If you hadn't asked that earlier, that's the one that would have come right off my tongue. It would have been like eliminate that.
By the way, here's why that's a brilliant answer. Because you could get reelected, even though kings obviously are not elected. You could get reelected with all the moms that are sick of daylight savings. They would actually vote for King Rogers if you got rid of daylight savings. That's a fact. And then if you want to leave a question, so we don't tell you who the next guest is. Sometimes that's scheduling. Sometimes we just like to keep it generic. But if you were to leave a question for somebody to answer, what would that question be?
Soccer, yes or no?
Whew.
Soccer. I mean, I got to tell you, man, I got friends of mine that watch a soccer game, and that they're watching the whole game to watch 1-0. And I'm like, that is miserable. Like, I can't believe.
I cannot promise you that I will not ask their feelings on kickball first.
Yeah.
I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. Bradon, dude, you have been so generous with your time. I cannot thank you enough. I'm super excited. Just one, grateful to be a friend, and the time we get to spend at Auburn and watching Auburn on the road. But you're doing really great work. I love how this turned into more about leadership and culture, because I think it is the essence of the title. And I really would love to follow up on how we help public sector entities kind of embrace a customer mindset, and not just said, but operationalized, to say, here's some tactical things that can help you do that. So from our whole team and just the time you took, I can't thank you enough. And I also can't wait to see you this weekend, buddy.
You too, bud. War Eagle.
All right. Thanks, Bradon. War Eagle.